The conference chamber aboard the Galactic Assembly Station hung in perfect silence. Ambassador Chen Wei sat motionless at the human delegation table, her hands folded before her, her expression carved from stone. Across the circular room, the Caldraxi representative, a towering creature with 4 arms and chitinous plates covering most of its torso, shifted its weight with what might have been impatience. Ambassador Chen, the Caldraxi delegate said, its translator converting the clicks and whistles into flat, emotionless standard. Your protest has been noted. The matter is settled. Chen didn't move. She'd been an ambassador for 12 years, and she'd learned that silence could be a weapon sharper than any words. Behind her, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Okonkwo stood at attention, her uniform crisp, her face unreadable. The rest of the human delegation, 3 military advisors and 2 civilian experts, waited. The treaty had been simple. Humanity would maintain sovereignty over the Sol system and its immediate colonies. In exchange, human vessels would not enter the contested region known as the Veil, 100 light-years of space claimed by 6 different species, rich in rare minerals and ancient artifacts. The treaty had held for 43 years. Last month, the Caldraxi Empire had sent mining fleets into human territory. Not the Veil. Not disputed space. Human colonies. 3 of them. The attacks had been surgical. The mining stations on Prosperity's orbit had been destroyed. The agricultural domes on New Guangzhou had been cracked open, exposing 2,000 colonists to vacuum. The research outpost on Kepler 442b had simply vanished, along with its 300 personnel. Chen had filed the formal protest within hours. She'd presented evidence, sensor logs, survivor testimonies, debris analysis. She'd invoked every clause of the treaty that protected human sovereignty. She demanded reparations, withdrawal, and a formal apology. The Galactic Assembly had deliberated for 6 days. Their decision: the incidents were unfortunate misunderstandings. The Caldraxi would pay a nominal fine. No admission of guilt. No withdrawal of forces. No justice for the 5,000 dead. Ambassador, the Assembly moderator said, its translation coming through with a faint buzzing quality. The moderator was a threne, a species that resembled a cluster of floating jellyfish bound together by bioluminescent threads. Do you accept the Assembly's ruling? Chen finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it carried perfectly in the acoustically designed chamber. No. The moderator's lights flickered in what might have been surprise. The ruling is final. There is no appeal process. I'm not appealing, Chen said. She stood, and the rest of the human delegation rose with her. I'm notifying this assembly that humanity hereby withdraws from all treaty obligations with the Caldraxi Empire, effective immediately. The chamber erupted. Delegates from a dozen species began shouting through their translators, the overlapping voices creating a wall of noise. The Caldraxi delegates' plates rattled against each other, a sign of agitation or anger. The moderator's lights pulsed rapidly. Ambassador Chen, you cannot unilaterally. We can, Chen interrupted. And we have. The treaty was broken the moment Caldraxi vessels entered our territory with hostile intent. Your ruling confirms that this assembly will not enforce its own agreements. Therefore, humanity will enforce them ourselves. She tapped her wrist console. Behind her, a holographic display activated, showing a simple list. Lieutenant Commander Okonkwo had prepared it personally. The list contained 57 Caldraxi assets. Mining stations. Colony ships. Military outposts. Fleet anchorages. Each one marked with precise coordinates, defensive capabilities, and estimated personnel counts. These are our terms, Chen said. The Caldraxi Empire will withdraw all forces from human territory within 72 hours. They will pay full reparations for damages and loss of life. They will issue a formal apology and acknowledgement of treaty violation. And they will surrender the commanders responsible for the attacks to face trial under human law. The Caldraxi delegate made a sound like grinding metal. You dare threaten us? You are one species. We are an empire spanning 200 systems. Chen's expression didn't change. These are not threats. These are final terms. If they are not met, every asset on that list will be destroyed. Not captured. Not damaged. Destroyed. Impossible, the Caldraxi said. Your fleet is a fraction of ours. Your technology is inferior. You are bluffing. Chen picked up her data tablet and walked toward the exit. The rest of the delegation followed. At the doorway she paused and looked back. 72 hours, she said. Not 73. The door sealed behind them. The human delegation's shuttle launched from the assembly station 12 minutes later. Chin sat in the command chair watching the station recede in the view screen. Around her, the delegation worked in focused silence. Message sent to Earth Command, Okonkwo reported. Encryption confirmed. They're standing by. Chin nodded. What's the assembly doing? Chaos, mostly, one of the civilian experts said, monitoring the diplomatic channels. 17 species have filed emergency session requests. The Kaldraxi are demanding we be sanctioned. The Threen want negotiations. The Vex the Vex think this is hilarious. Let them talk, Chin said. Okonkwo, status on the fleet? The lieutenant commander brought up a tactical display. In the darkness beyond the assembly station, beyond the shipping lanes and civilian traffic, the human fleet waited. Not the fleet most species knew about. Not the patrol groups and system defense forces that protected human colonies. This was different. Task Force Prometheus reports ready, Okonkwo said quietly. All vessels at full combat readiness. Captains are awaiting the go order. Chun looked at the countdown timer on her display. 72 hours. 3 days for the Kaldraxi to make the right choice. She didn't think they would. In her experience, empires that had gone unchallenged for centuries didn't understand consequences until those consequences arrived with overwhelming force. Maintain current heading, she ordered. And get me a secure line to Admiral Keita. The shuttle accelerated toward Earth, carrying humanity's ultimatum behind it like a wake. The Kaldraxi had ignored the treaty. They'd killed 5,000 humans and expected a fine to settle the matter. They were about to learn that humanity had different terms. And those terms were final. The war room beneath Geneva Command hummed with controlled tension. Admiral Yuki Keita stood before the central holodeble, her silver hair tied back, her posture rigid with decades of military discipline. Around her, 24 officers monitored displays showing ship positions, weapon statuses, and intelligence feeds from across human space. Confirm the timeline, Keita said. Captain Marcus Hall, her chief of staff, brought up the countdown. 68 hours, 17 minutes remaining. Ambassador Chen's shuttle will reach Earth in approximately 9 hours. Keita nodded. She'd known Chen Wei for 20 years. They'd served together during the First Contact War, back when humanity had stumbled into galactic politics with blood on its hands and desperation in its heart. Chin understood what was at stake. More importantly, she understood what humanity had become in the 4 decades since. Status of Task Force Prometheus? All vessels report ready, Hall said. The fleet is maintaining position at Rally Point Obsidian. Stealth fields are active. As far as Kaldraxi intelligence knows, we have 12 capital ships and maybe 40 destroyers scattered across our territory. Keita allowed herself a thin smile. Let them think that. Let the entire galaxy think humanity was still the minor species that had barely earned its seat at the assembly. The holodeble shifted, displaying the true picture. Task Force Prometheus consisted of 114 warships. Not the patrol cruisers and system defense boats the galaxy saw. These were vessels humanity had been building in the darkness for 30 years, ever since the Treaty of Azure had been signed. Battle carriers. Dreadnoughts. Arsenal ships carrying enough kinetic penetrators to crack a planet's crust. Stealth frigates equipped with weapons the assembly had banned a century ago. Humanity had signed every disarmament agreement, attended every peace conference, and smiled at every diplomatic reception. And in the shipyards hidden in asteroid fields and dead systems, they'd prepared for the day the treaties failed. The Kaldraxi are moving, an intelligence officer reported. Intercepted communications show they're repositioning 3 battle groups. Looks like they're reinforcing the mining fleets in our territory. They think we're bluffing, Hall said. Of course they do, Keita replied. They're an empire. They've conquered 40 species. The idea that humans, the species they remember as barely capable of FTL travel 4 decades ago, could threaten them is absurd. She zoomed the holodeble to show the Kaldraxi positions. The mining fleets sat in orbit around Prosperity, New Guangzhou, and Kepler 442b like parasites. Each fleet had military escorts. Cruisers, destroyers, support vessels. Enough firepower to handle human patrol groups. Not enough to handle what was coming. The assembly? Keita asked. Emergency session convened 2 hours ago, the intelligence officer said. 17 species calling for sanctions against us. The Kaldraxi are demanding we be expelled from the assembly entirely. The Threen are pushing for mediation. The Vex abstained from comment, but their ambassador was observed making what translators believe were jokes. Keita had met the Vex ambassador once. A species that communicated primarily through bioluminescent patterns and found violence endlessly entertaining. They'd probably love what was about to happen. Any species supporting our position? 3. The Telran Concordat issued a statement saying treaty violations should have consequences. The free colonies of Andromeda called the Assembly ruling an abdication of justice. And the Hive aggregate simply said they were watching with interest. Not much support, but Kata hadn't expected any. Most species saw humanity as useful but ultimately expendable. A trading partner. A source of culture and technology. Not a power to be taken seriously. The Caldraxi had made that mistake fatal. Transmission from the Caldraxi Empire, the communications officer announced. It's addressed to you personally, Admiral? Kata raised an eyebrow. Put it through. The holodeble shifted to display a Caldraxi military commander. Its plates were decorated with rank insignia, and its 4 arms moved in what the cultural database suggested was a gesture of contempt. Admiral Kata, the Caldraxi said through its translator. I am War Leader Thaxkar of the 4th Conquest Fleet. I speak for the Empire when I say your ultimatum is rejected. Humanity lacks the strength to enforce such demands. You have 72 hours to withdraw your threats and accept the Assembly's ruling. If you do not, the Empire will consider it an act of war. The transmission ended. The war room fell silent. Officers exchanged glances. Hall looked at Kata, waiting for orders. Kata studied the holodeble for a long moment. The Caldraxi positions. The human fleet waiting in the darkness. The timeline counting down. Open a channel, she said quietly. Maximum encryption. Direct to Task Force Prometheus. Admiral's eyes only. Channel open, the communications officer confirmed. Kata leaned over the console, her voice calm and measured. This is Admiral Kata to all Task Force commanders. The Caldraxi have rejected our terms. Execute Operation Reckoning on my mark. Target priority, all military assets first, then mining infrastructure. Rules of engagement are weapons free. I want every Caldraxi vessel in human territory either captured or debris within 6 hours of go order. Minimize collateral damage where possible, but mission success is paramount. Confirm receipt. One by one, confirmations came back. Captain Park of the battle carrier Indomitable. Commander Osei of the Arsenal ship Final Word. Captain Zhang of the stealth frigate Ghost Protocol. All the way down the chain of command. All commanders confirm ready, Hall reported. Kata straightened. Around her, the war room staff waited. This was the moment. The decision that would define humanity's place in the galaxy for the next century. She thought of the colonists on Prosperity. The families on New Guangzhou. The researchers on Kepler 442b. 5,000 people who died because an empire thought it could act with impunity. Mark, she said. The communications officer transmitted the order. Across the display, icons began to move. Task Force Prometheus broke from its holding position and accelerated toward human territory. The stealth fields dropped. For the first time, the galaxy saw what humanity had built in the darkness. Time to target? Kata asked. 12 hours, Hall said. They'll reach the first Caldraxi position exactly 60 hours after Ambassador Chen's ultimatum. Good, Kata said. Broadcast a message on all frequencies. Text only. No encryption. What's the message, Admiral? Kata looked at the holodeble, watching her fleet move like a blade cutting through the void. Final terms are not negotiable. The message transmitted across known space. In a dozen languages, through 100 relay stations, to every species monitoring human communications. The Caldraxi would receive it in minutes. The Assembly would debate its meaning. Other species would calculate their positions. None of it mattered anymore. Humanity had issued its terms. The Caldraxi had refused. Now there was only one language left to speak. And humanity had spent 40 years learning to speak it fluently. Captain Sarah Park gripped the command chair as the Indomitable dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The battle carrier shuddered, its mass bleeding off relativistic momentum in a controlled burn that would have torn apart civilian vessels. Around her, the bridge crew worked with mechanical precision, each officer trained for exactly this moment. Tactical report, Park ordered. Multiple contacts, Lieutenant Chin said from the tactical station. Caldraxi 4th Mining Fleet, exactly where intelligence said they'd be. I'm reading 2 heavy cruisers, 6 destroyers for support vessels, and the mining platforms themselves. They're in high orbit around Prosperity. Park studied the main display. The Caldraxi fleet hung in space like a malignant growth, their vessels clustered around the ruined human mining stations. Below them, Prosperity's surface gleamed blue and white, an ocean world humanity had been terraforming for 20 years. The mining stations in orbit had processed rare elements from Prosperity's moon. Had processed them. Past tense. Now they were debris fields and frozen corpses. Status of the task force? All vessels reporting in, the communications officer said. 41 ships at this location. The final word has firing solutions on all primary targets. Stealth frigates have flanking positions. We have complete tactical superiority. Park nodded. Task Force Prometheus had split into 3 groups, one for each violated colony. Her group had drawn Prosperity. Admiral Keita herself commanded the assault on New Guangzhou. Commander Osei would handle Kepler 442b. Have they detected us? Yes, Captain. Caldraxi sensors just picked us up. They're transmitting. It sounds confused. Put it through. The voice that came across the channel was distorted by the translator, but the emotion was clear. Surprise. Then anger. Human vessels, you are in violation of assembly navigation protocols. Identify yourselves and state your purpose. Park allowed herself a cold smile. This is Captain Sarah Park of the Terran battle carrier Indomitable. Our purpose is enforcement of territory sovereignty under the Treaty of Azure, which your forces violated 18 days ago. You have one opportunity to surrender. Power down all weapons and prepare to be boarded. You have 5 minutes. Silence on the channel. Then, you cannot be serious. We are the 4th conquest fleet of the Caldraxi Empire. You are 40 ships. We have 300 vessels within 6 hours travel. Surrender now or... 4 minutes, 30 seconds, Park interrupted. The channel went dead. On the display, the Caldraxi vessels began moving, repositioning into defensive formations. Their weapons came online, energy signatures spiking across multiple spectrums. Lieutenant Chen looked up from tactical. They're preparing to engage, Captain. Let them, Park said. Continue the countdown. All ships maintain firing solutions but do not engage until the deadline expires or they fire first. The bridge fell silent except for the steady tick of the countdown timer. Park watched the Caldraxi fleet maneuver, their commanders probably screaming for reinforcements, trying to understand how humanity had built this fleet in secret, calculating whether they could win. They couldn't. Park had seen the simulations. She trained for 3 years on the Indomitable, learning every system, every weapon, every tactical doctrine humanity had developed in the darkness. The Caldraxi were powerful. Their technology was proven across centuries of conquest. But humanity had fought its way up from a planet with nothing but violence and ingenuity. They'd survived ice ages and plagues and wars that consumed continents. They'd reached space through sheer determination, made first contact while their world still bled from nuclear conflict, and earned their place in the galaxy by refusing to die. The Caldraxi had forgotten what it meant to fight a species that had crawled up from hell itself. 2 minutes, Chin reported. The Caldraxi heavy cruiser Devouring Blade moved forward, its weapon ports glowing with contained energy, trying intimidation, trying to force humanity to blink first. Park didn't blink. 1 minute. The communications officer looked at Park. Captain, they're hailing us again. Ignore it, Park said. They had their chance to talk. They had 18 days to withdraw. They had 72 hours to accept our terms. Time for talking is over. 30 seconds. Park leaned forward in her command chair. Around the bridge, officers gripped their stations. The Indomitable's reactor hummed with barely contained power, feeding the weapon systems, the shields, the drives. A battle carrier was a city in space, carrying 4,000 crew and enough firepower to reduce a small moon to asteroids. 10 seconds. 9. 8. On the display, the Caldraxi fleet held its position, waiting. Still believing this was a bluff, that humanity would back down, that the natural order of the galaxy would reassert itself. 3, 2, 1. Mark. All vessels, Park said, her voice carrying across the command channel to every ship in her task force. Execute final terms. Fire. The Indomitable spoke first. Rail guns that could punch through a kilometer of solid steel opened fire, sending streams of magnetically accelerated projectiles toward the Caldraxi fleet at a fraction of light speed. The battle carrier's main spinal weapon, a directed energy cannon that drew power directly from the ship's fusion core, lanced out in a beam of coherent particles. Around her, 40 other ships fired simultaneously. The effect was apocalyptic. The Caldraxi heavy cruiser Devouring Blade tried to evade, its drives flaring as it attempted to break formation. The railgun rounds caught it amidships, punching through shields that had been designed to stop conventional weapons. The ship's hull buckled, atmosphere venting in explosive jets. Before it could recover, 3 missiles from the Arsenal ship Final Word impacted its engineering section. The cruiser broke in half, its reactor containment failing in a flash of violent light. The second heavy cruiser managed to return fire. Energy beams raked across the Indomitable's shields, forcing the battle carrier to roll and distribute the damage. But the shields held. Humanity had built them to withstand sustained assault, not single strikes, and Park's gunners adjusted their aim. "Target their bridge," Park ordered. Precision strike. A railgun salvo bracketed the Caldraxi cruiser, forcing it to evade directly into the firing solution of the stealth frigate Ghost Protocol. The frigate's torpedoes, tiny vessels packed with shaped nuclear charges, struck the cruiser's command section and detonated. When the light faded, the second heavy cruiser was drifting, powerless and defeated. The destroyers tried to scatter, but they'd waited too long. Stealth frigates had positioned themselves during the countdown, and now they fired from angles the Caldraxi hadn't defended. 3 destroyers died in the first 30 seconds. 2 more lasted almost a minute before concentrated fire overwhelmed their defenses. The final destroyer broadcast a surrender signal and shut down its weapons. "Cease fire on that destroyer," Park ordered. "Tactical, what about the support vessels?" "They're broadcasting surrender," Chin reported. "No hostile action. The mining platforms are doing the same." Park nodded slowly. The entire engagement had lasted 97 seconds. 2 heavy cruisers destroyed. 5 destroyers destroyed. 1 destroyer captured. 4 support vessels and mining platforms surrendered. Human casualties, 0. "Broadcast to all Caldraxi vessels," Park said. "Prepare to be boarded. Any attempt to scuttle or self-destruct will be met with immediate lethal force. All personnel are now prisoners under human military law and will be treated according to the Covenant of Armed Conduct." She looked at her executive officer. "Deploy Marine boarding teams. I want every survivor secured and every ship searched. Document everything. Sensor logs, orders, communications. All of it goes to the tribunal." "Aye, Captain." Park sat back in her command chair and pulled up the tactical feed from the other task force groups. At New Guangzhou, Admiral Keita's forces had engaged the Caldraxi Second Mining Fleet. The battle had lasted 3 minutes. Caldraxi casualties, 11 ships destroyed. Human casualties, minor damage to a frigate's shield generator. At Kepler 442b, Commander Osei's group had found the Caldraxi already trying to flee. They destroyed 6 ships and captured the rest. Across human territory, the Caldraxi occupation was over. 57 military assets destroyed or captured. Mining operations shut down. The Empire's forces expelled completely. All within 6 hours, exactly as Admiral Keita had ordered. "Communications," Park said. "Transmit to Earth Command. Mission successful. Prosperity is secure. Await further orders." She stood and walked to the forward viewport. Outside, the Indomitable's marine shuttles were already moving toward the captured vessels, carrying boarding teams and medical personnel. Below, Prosperity turned in its orbit, beautiful and violated and now free